Flake.
Thanks. In the interest of time, I'll just ask one question. Mr. Liveris, in your testimony, you note the competitive advantage, to American industry by maintaining affordable gas prices. I think we all agree with that. But when you look at Dow's online policy statements, they will tout the benefits of a competitive open market, particularly as it pertains to exporting chemicals. Why do open markets work there in driving down price and benefits to everybody, but they don't in terms of producing natural gas and export of natural gas?
I'll try and be brief. It's, as I said, a complex conversation. Number one, open markets, we're very much for. We are for exports. We are for balanced exports, so we don't lose competitive advantage domestically. Gas, as already noted, has to be liquefied and shipped at billions and billions of dollars. That is not an open market. That's a point-to-point contract. There's probably 30 of these contracts around the world, from nation states to nation states. Not all go to free market NATO allies. These are countries that need gas because they don't have oil. Their equivalent is to import oil. That's why there is a national security interest. But to take the gas and actually export as a primary, 10 producers in the world that are gas-rich, only one of them chooses to disadvantage the domestic sector by not looking at the efficiency of the domestic market, because it takes so much to make this shippable versus an oil. Okay, you actually can leave it home in an efficient market home. So how do you actually balance how much of it goes offshore versus home is a conversation that should be in a conversation like this. Domestic manufacturers in places like Saudi Arabia, in places like Russia, who actually have top-down policies, say, I'm going to keep the gas home to diversify my economy away from just being exposed as an oil exporter and a gas exporter in their two cases. In a free market democracy, we need to get the balance of all stakeholders to the table, but recognize that this is not a commodity world price yet. One day it might be. There may be enough LNG trade. That's why I disagree with this market of LNG being 30 BCF a day. The world energy market is the gas market. The gas will substitute the oil. The gas will substitute the coal. The gas will substitute, ultimately, nuclear when nuclear is not allowed. So it's the world energy market that this serves. Therefore, it's fairly infinite in that sense. So you've got to be careful. You don't let the current world energy price, which is oil, set the domestic gas price as an unintended consequence. So crawl, walk, run. Let some of this occur. Let the BCFs go up. Let it rise as supply rises with responsible regulation. Let's look at the public interest and the effect on domestic competitiveness in both the consumer and the industrial user. Let's get both of them. That's my quadruple win.
If I understand right, Mr. Gerard, you're saying that the best way to let that happen, to find that balance, is to let markets do that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, Senator, when you look at the reality of what we're dealing with today, there's already about 37 to 40 BCF a day capacity that exists in the world. The expectation between now and 2025, 2030 is that the entire market for LNG is going to be in the 50 to 60, 65 BCF. The amount that we're talking about in the U.S. as potential proposals or permits is about 30 BCF. The potential additional build across the world is 50. So if you look at all the proposal to export LNG today, you've got 114 BCF potential trying to satisfy a 50 BCF a day market. The amount that would leave here, and most of the studies show, at most perhaps 5 to 6 BCF. The natural gas industry increased our production in the United States by 6 BCF in 2 years in the United States. And we're just at the verge of figuring out how to further be more efficient to produce even greater volumes. The likelihood of this having any significant impact on price, in fact, all the other independent studies I've done show somewhere between 2 and potentially 11% impact on price, is highly unlikely. It's the market that brought us here today. The market will continue to drive the price down. The other added advantage is we're creating jobs in this country, great paying jobs, as we try to fulfill the demand on a global basis. We shouldn't overlook that. And we're really at an opportunity to change the equation. We're now the largest producer of natural gas in the world, surpassing Russia. It's a great opportunity. We shouldn't go slow and let that market dissipate, because it will be filled by others around the world, and we're putting at disadvantage our own Americans and others who are prepared to risk market capital and to build the facility to export the product.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Franken.
To approve.
Okay, so this is what you were referring to on page 6 of your written testimony then, when you refer to the need to promote and enforce policies that would keep prices at reasonable levels. I think reasonable was the term you used.
A reasonable meaning to cover the risk of everyone in the value chain, including the explorers, including the entrepreneurs, including the producers, but including society that needs smart regulation so it's produced responsibly.
Okay, well, one person's conception, one person's concept of what is a reasonable price might be different than another's.
Clearly.
So who gets to decide that? And isn't that a highly unavoidably subjective standard?
Well, Senator, you would agree that if I go to a completely different world, the world of agriculture, who sets world food prices? Does the agricultural sector from every country follow everyone's rules? There is rules-based free trade in everything we do, including my products. I have standards in Japan I can't meet because the government of Japan sets that standard, so I can't export from here into Japan. The auto industry is quite familiar with that.
Okay, so
Who sets the rules is where everyone has to be at the table and figures out what the right rule for free trade is.
Okay, so everyone's at the table, and they do make their arguments, but you're suggesting a system in which the rule ultimately would be made by the Department of Energy, and you suggest that the Department of Energy should implement a rulemaking process that would require the Department of Energy to analyze a comprehensive list of criteria before they approve any LNG export. That one of those criteria ought to include an identification by the would-be exporter of any jobs that might be lost in the manufacturing industry. Is that right?
So the current law, the public interest criteria in the Department of Energy is our law, your law, or everyone's law. You set the law. So the regulatory regime has worked in the past by doing it right. This is a newfound bounty. The criteria should be all of the above. Responsible production. Does society benefit as a whole? And is job creation something that is additive here? Can we get job creation in the oil and gas sector and the manufacturing sector? And I think that should be one of the criteria that the DOE looks at.
And should anyone who wants to export anything from the United States also be required before exporting it to prove to government officials that it wouldn't cost any jobs in any other industry in the United States?
And I didn't actually answer you by saying it should be jobs only. It should be all criteria.
But that should be one of them.
Food security, defense, and energy security, in my view, are national interests. So the DOE has public interest for some reasons, and I would imagine the national interest being at the highest hierarchy. The national interest includes lots of things, of which job creation is one of them.
Okay. I see my time's expired. Thank you very much, Mr. Livers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Mr. Eisenberg, I'd like to just ask you if I could. Is in your testimony you state, quote, the United States' ability to challenge other countries' existing export restraints will be virtually non-existent if the United States begins imposing its own export restrictions. You go on to say U.S. actions are often replicated by other trading partners to our own dismay, and if the United States went down the path of export restrictions, even more countries would quickly follow suit and could easily limit U.S. access to other key natural resources that are not readily available in the United States. So would you please expand upon this in your comments for the committee?
Sure, and thank you for the question. And I should probably preface that by saying that we have a team of international trade experts who would be very happy to support any questions for the record beyond what I can answer here today.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, I think if you look, certainly most recently at the China raw materials case that the U.S. just won, I mean, we're in a situation where if we actually turn around and make the exact same argument, then we could basically be laying the foundation for further challenges by others to our commodities overseas. So yeah, I mean, as I understand it, there are significant WTO issues here.
Mr. Liveris, you argue that we shouldn't export LNG so we can create jobs here in the United States. And you say that you just want to see natural gas exported in solid form products instead of liquid form. You say you want to give American companies the opportunity to add value to natural gas and earn a higher return for the resource. Why shouldn't the federal government set up a policy to benefit manufacturers higher up on on the value chain. Why shouldn't you just limit exports of chemicals so that domestic manufacturers can add value to them before they're shipped overseas? I mean, the question is where you draw that line, isn't it?
Actually, my testimony, Senator, I didn't actually say that it's either or. In fact, I went to great lengths to say it's and. I think we should do both. We should export LNG, and I think definitely we should look at the public interest with respect to our NATO allies. That's something we should have on the table. But in addition, let's put the power of the and in place. Let's look at the unintended consequences of a non-rules-based free trade market, gas. One day it may well have the liquidity to be a rules-based free trade market, but today it does not. Okay? And the unintended consequence of trying to do one or the other is you transfer the risk away and you let the risk be assumed by American manufacturers and consumers to the positive of someone else being de-risked overseas. Let's do both. Let's have exports and look at the unintended consequences on domestic consumers.
Okay. Mr. Medlock, could I ask you to respond to what Mr. Liveris just said?
Sure. Liquidity is something that is gained as markets mature, as you have more entrants of suppliers and demanders, and that's precisely what we're seeing in natural gas markets around the world right now. If you do anything to impede that progress, then you slow the progress of liquidity. You actually end up creating rents along pieces of the value chain. In this particular case, let's say hypothetically there was a cap placed on the amount of LNG that could be exported that was a non-market cap. Basically what you do is you provide rents to those first movers, the ones who actually build the export infrastructure, because the prices will never adjust abroad to actually bring them down, so that you actually end up with super profits basically for companies involved in the export business. So I would not promote that, because by actually limiting how liquidity grows, you actually support certain elements of the value chain, which is non-competitive, to be quite frank.
Thank you. Senator Coons?